All right. So I got to thinking. What's up, just chilly, Cassie? All right. So real quick, since Cassie's in here, um, I I was a little I with the StreamYard chat. It's hard. It doesn't show me who was timed out or what. I have to actually look at the YouTube one. And once I logged off, I realized that there were some of Misery's mods who were uh, who were timed out. Some of that has to do with the fact uh, that there was a shit ton of trolls in this live, in that last live, and uh, and some people were timed out by accident. Uh, some people were timed out because there was confusion going on, simply because my mods were not ready for that. They didn't know what to do. But I have brought them up to speed, and I came to the conclusion, and I apologize for that, ANC. I am sorry about that. That was a mistake. And I have brought my mods up to speed. They understand what the dealio is, and I just realized something when I was when I uh, a big fuck that jumped into my head. I'm not being run off my own fucking channel. That shit is not gonna fucking happen. So trolls, that's fine. You got trolls. You want to be trolls. You want to come in here and fuck with my shit. That's okay. It's something I'm not used to. I'm not really prepared for it usually. Um, and That's why I have mods. And as a matter of fact, just for tonight, um, some of you are some of you are very very some of you are very very loyal new subscribers. And my mods didn't know who you were. They don't know of new friends that I've made in this community. And what I'm going to do is, if you guys are okay with it, for those of you who I happen to know are wrenches for Misery, and have been very supportive of me and very helpful. Uh, if things get a little out of hand again and I need a little extra help, I would be more than honored if you guys would be okay if I temporarily wrenched you to give my mods a little bit of help, because you guys happen to know some of these trolls. If you're okay with that. So if you are, go ahead and let me know. And if not, I that's cool too. I realize that I'm asking something of you that is a bit unorthodox, but I'm not getting run off my own fucking channel, man. That shit is not fucking happening. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is do what I planned on doing, and I'm going to play a documentary, and we're going to talk about it. Thank you, Cassie. I really appreciate that. So this is a documentary that I find very what's up, shipwrecked. Um, this is a documentary that uh that I find very very insightful, and I find very very interesting, very 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 thought provoking. Um, so um, and I want to be clear. I was completely and totally honest about the reasons why I logged off earlier. But then I got to thinking about it, and I said, nope, 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 no, 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 no. That's not good enough. So because that's against my character too, and so now I'm just, as a fuck you, going to keep going here tonight. And as a thank you to you guys who uh, like my channel and subscribe to my channel and know why my channel exists and what I'm doing and believe in what I'm doing here, and support what I'm doing here, I'm going to just continue to do this as long as it fucking takes, as long as you guys want to be around. So, and I mean tonight, I'm as far as the long run goes, yeah, I'm not going fucking anywhere. So, that's how this is going to go down. And that's the fucking bottom line, period. So, oh, it's always safe, Reese. It's always safe. I was just caught a little bit off guard. And I am a firm believer in, I do not believe in bullying. And when I say I don't believe, I mean that I don't believe in being bullied. That's actually the best way that I can put that. I do not believe in being bullied, and I will not be bullied. You cannot bully me. So that's it. Here we are, and we're moving forward. So anyway, what's up, Sue Shaw? We are going to move forward with this, and we are going to have a good time no matter fucking what. I am going to go ahead and play this. And ironically, this suits this documentary suits the title that I had prior, and I will be commentating over it. So it's going to be a little bit of a watch party, if you guys are into that. And what's up, Mandy, Texas Scout? Thanks for coming back. Everybody who came back, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. What's up, Remy D? Oh, you're twerking tonight, Copper Star Misery. You better believe that. Everybody's twerking tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. And this is a documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know? And it is extremely, extremely interesting. And the opening is going to kind of explain what it's about, more or less. And it's about quantum physics, which is a little bit beyond my education. And it's a little confusing, but together I think we could probably figure it out and kind of not necessarily figure it out and break it down, but we're going to try to break it down. We're going to do that together. And I think we're going to have some fun doing it. So let me go ahead and get that all set up. Right. Thanks, Breakfast Club.
Newsreel Films presents exciting news. Is the divorce over? Are spirit and science tying the knot once more? or the church in the laboratory, saying the same thing. Out of the misty ages of antiquity, the quest for the divine and the quest for knowledge about the universe marched hand in hand. Ancient Sumer, there was a god of astronomy, a god of horticulture, irrigation, and the temple priests were the scribes and technologists investigating these fields of knowledge. Ancient Greece, philosophers asking the questions of why are we here, developed the theory of the atom, celestial movements, and human ethics. Medieval Europe, the Western Church arose to a position of supreme power, kingmaker, landowner, and purveyor of the truth. The church took it upon themselves to be the one knower of everything. The dogma was law. Yet science had moved forward and now challenged the dogma that the Earth was the center of the universe. Copernicus, Bruno, and Galileo all felt the heavy hand of the church. The tragedy. Unable to suppress science anymore, the church and science divided up knowledge and human endeavor. Descartes invented dualism. The church had the unseen, science the seen, and materialism was born. An uneasy truce. Scientists were no longer being bound, and they reacted with a vengeance. All the unseen is fantasy, delusion. We are strictly little machines running in a predictable machine universe governed by strict immutable laws. The church pushed back. Soulless scientists were condemned to hell. Darwin countered. The creator is nothing, nowhere. We are random mutations, simply a carrier of TNA's relentless quest for more in a meaningless universe. And meanwhile, both science and religion were hitting the wall. If everything was mechanistic and God was the holy creator, then what were we humans supposed to do? Science dug ever deeper into a dead universe and stumbled upon and unlocked a mystery. In tiny corners of space and time, scientists found unfathomable energy and mind-numbing mysteries. Mysteries that suggest we are all connected, that the physical universe is essentially non-physical. Time and space are just constructs of this non-materialness. And today, renegade scientists are meeting with religious leaders. Conferences pushing forward a meeting of science and spirit are springing up. As the 20th century blew open the doors of a mechanistic view, will the 21st century blow down the iron wall between the church and laboratory? This is your Is News Real reporter, signing off.
All right, so that intro kind of explains and it kind of implies that science has basically evolved to a point.
And how deep and how far we want to go is really how much do you want to discover about your true nature?
Alice went down the rabbit hole where she met Mad Hatter. Hatter was mad. And the idea was you want to get out of the rabbit hole after you've gone in. There's two stages to science. There's the crazy part where you go down the rabbit hole, and then there's the part where you check the craziness of your ideas against a rigorous, strict, straitjacket-like process.
I think the interesting thing about science, the interesting thing about physics, is that it is a genuinely new and novel way of trying to come to grips with the world.
Yeah, so they this basically is explaining that science has evolved to a point to where religion and things within the religious dogmas, so to speak, and the stigma of religion, there are now explanations for these things that can be explained scientifically. This is basically what this documentary is more or less about. And it's extremely interesting to me. Now, as you can see, it's like 3 hours long, so we're not going to go over every single detail of this documentary, but we're going to discuss a few things on it. And so I find this extremely interesting, and I realize that a lot of my new subscribers are deep thinkers. And so I figured that this would be something that we could all enjoy and discuss. So that intro in the beginning kind of explains that this is where science and religion have kind of met through time and evolution. These two things have kind of met and kind of melded into each other, so to speak. And I find it extraordinarily fascinating. And everybody that you're hearing talk here are all, most of them at least, are quantum physicists. So it's kind of difficult. You gotta it's kind of hard to understand what they're saying because the chances are they're much more educated than any of us here.
I think the experimental method, which is important to physics, is a very different business from the method of revelation or the method of meditation or something like that. I don't think it's true that, for example, adherents of, say, Buddhism could imagine changing their beliefs based on the outcomes of some experiments people do with electrons.
Why this apparent rift between the church and science, or between science and religion, emerged today. I think the roots of that are very deep, because it probably goes back to a conviction that some of the books of the scriptures, like the book of Genesis, which deals with the beginnings, is actually telling us about the origins of the world. Now, in fact, any biblical scholar will tell you, and this is not news, that the book of Genesis was never meant to be about the origins of the world. But many churchmen believed that in the book of Genesis you had actual sort of live news, like CNN, about the beginnings of creation. And therefore you had many people down through the ages, like the famous Archbishop James Ussher in Ireland in 1650, who calculated all the ages of the patriarchs back along and worked out to his own satisfaction that the creation of the world occurred in the year 4004 BC on the 17th of September at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I think that there must be a scientific explanation for spirituality. I don't think there's been a good one until recently. To me, the only one that makes sense is that proto-consciousness, platonic values, goodness, truth, exist at this fundamental level of space-time geometry, can influence our actions if we're open to them, and interconnects us to all other beings, to the universe at large.
It's time to get wise.
Science creates the stories that we live by. And science has told us a very bleak story. It's told us that we're some sort of genetic mistake, that we have genes that use us basically to move on to the next generation, and that we randomly mutate. It's said that we are outside of our universe, that we're alone, that we're separate, and that we are this sort of lonely mistake on a lonely planet in a lonely universe. And that informs our view of the world. It informs our view of ourselves. And we're now realizing that this view of separateness, is one of the most destructive things. It's the thing that creates all the problems in the world.
It's time to get wise.
And we're now realizing that that paradigm is wrong, that we aren't separate. We are all one. We're all together. At the very nethermost element of our being, we are connected. And
see, I love that. I love that this type of thinking is way more beneficial to individual growth. Ironically, in my opinion, this way of thinking, of realizing that we're all connected in some way whatsoever, and even according to these people who are scientists, saying scientifically we are all connected on some level. The biggest problem, what has kept us from evolving as a species, is that way of thinking that we are separate, that we are that we're alone in the universe, and that we are the end all be all, human beings being everything and only being the only things in the eyes of God, if you will. That is a very, very primitive and also a very arrogant way of thinking, whereas it's not beneficial to us to think that way. It's slowing us down. And these people who are scientists are actually more on the side of religion than religious people are. It's totally ironic, and I absolutely love it.
And so we're trying to understand and absorb what are the implications of that. What does this really mean to me in my life?
We need a new spiritual milieu. We need a new spiritual way of understanding the nature of what it is to be a human being. Because the old ways, the old mythologies, the old monarchy, king, God, versus the old lawful scientist way of doing everything are dead. They need to be buried. We need a new realm, a new vision. And I think quantum physics, if anything, could help us get a step up in the right direction.
I think the key aspect of the new paradigm, at least in medicine, which is my little piece.
Thank you,
is that
Danielle. Have a good night.
consciousness is real and has an impact.
We have to go beyond our senses to create a new paradigm.
It may very well be that what's going on inside of you, in your brain, in your nervous system, in your nature of observation, how memory works, how mind works, it may very well be that what is happening there is some kind of observer matter interrelationship, which is indeed making things real for you, affecting how you perceive reality. It's not changing the reality out there. You're not changing big chairs and big trucks and bulldozers and rockets taking off. You're not changing those, no. But you're changing how you perceive things, and maybe how you think about the things, how you feel about things, how you sense the world.
The infinite information that the brain is processing every single second tells us that there's more to the world than we're perceiving. However, every single time we're immersed in an experience with our senses, seeing, smelling, tasting, feeling, as we're immersed centrally in our reality.
We know nothing about reality, and all of our sense of so-called reality out there is filtered through our sense organs.
The brain processes 400 billion bits of information a second, but we're only aware of 2,000 of those. That means that reality is happening in the brain all the time.
Yeah, that's insane right there. The thought that reality is happening in our brains at all times, and we're basically, what they're saying here is that we pick and choose what we perceive. We pick and choose little bits of information. So that kind of goes into that thing that we always hear about. We always hear about how we only use 12% of our brains or something like that, which is I've looked into that. That's actually not very accurate. But we it's not what our brain gets and what information we actually absorb. It's what we actually pay attention to. That is a hell of a thought right there. Think about that. It's our own doing. We are merely only paying attention to certain things. All that information is there, but we're conditioned to simply pay attention to certain things that we think that we can handle. Now I'm gonna skip through this bullshit right here.
You should try it.
Actually, no, I'm not.
How do I know what I'm doing? I and the vase are one. Hey, might help your work too. I live through my eyes. acting in reality.
Not just some nebulous, nothing, touchy, feely world of shifting whatevers.
If it's real, I want to see it.
The eyes are, in some senses, a camcorder because they are taking that information and they're storing it, but you're not really able to get it to mean anything until you actually put it all together. So in some senses, it requires the editor's table to really put the whole thing together, to put the movie together of what your life and your world is actually about.
If I get out of bed in the morning, okay, and I suddenly decide to take very seriously the claim, which is surely a true claim, that I don't know for sure if my eyes are working correctly, okay? So that for all I know, even though it looks like there's a stable floor by the side of my bed, there might be a clip or something like that, okay? If I am unable to order those possibilities in terms of probabilities that I assign to them, then I'm not going to get out of bed. Seems to me I'm paralyzed in the most literal sense of the word. Okay, I'm now.
This guy's such a fucking nerd, but he's making so much sense.
Take the next step. It's definitely the case that we know that my eyes might, in principle, be deceiving me at any moment. We've had experience of people before subject to hallucinations, and even if we didn't, we don't know how to prove as a fundamental matter that our eyes never deceive us. That's absolutely right. But when we make the decision to get out of bed in the morning, we are assigning probabilities to the various hypotheses compatible with my seeing a floor by the bed. One hypothesis is there really is a floor there, and that's why I'm seeing it. Another hypothesis is my seeing the floor is a hallucination, and there's a cliff there. By getting out of bed in the morning, you endorse one of those hypotheses as more likely than another.
Well, ultimate reality, I think.
Okay, so that's pretty fucking mind-blowing right there. This dude is basically saying for the cheap seats, for the layman, and trust me, the only reason I understand what he's talking about right now is because I've had to watch this fucking documentary like 4 times. But he's basically saying that the reason, basically in layman's terms, like in the short version, the reason why we perceive so little is out of fear. We're afraid of seeing too much, so we create in our minds a safe path to walk down. So that's extremely interesting. We're afraid of everything that actually is, so we limit our perception to what is safe to us personally and individually.
It very frequently depends a lot on how a person perceives it and what they actually think is the real reality of our world.
If the brain is processing 400 billion bits of information and our awareness is only on 2,000, that means reality is happening in the brain all the time. It's receiving that information, and yet we haven't integrated it. But if we're given knowledge and information outside of convention, outside the box of convention, or say we merge quantum physics and neurophysiology, and the brain is asked to contemplate, or we're asked to contemplate on that, and examine the what-ifs and possibilities and potentials, and associate our knowns with our experience of what we know, and repeat it over and over again, the brain is going to start to integrate 2 independent neural nets, and it's going to create a new vision. And that new vision is going to be by taking a flashlight and shining it from those 2,000 bits of information that have to do with our body and our environment and time, slightly over in the dark, and looking at something new. That's called realization.
Yeah, that's the deaf
earlier.
actress.
Another dream?
Marley Marlin. I don't know if that's actually her name. It's something along those lines, Cassie. But yeah, you do recognize her. I could see that. Marley Matlin. Yes, that's it. Just Shelley.
Cool. Hey, maybe it was a past life, or a parallel reality, or a future life.
Get weird.
Or maybe that dream was trying to tell you the truth.
She's been in a lot of stuff, Soul for Music.
Maybe you should try different anxiety pills.
Yes, Breakfast Club Misery. Marley Matlin. That's it.
I have to go get dressed. I hope you feel better, Amanda.
Amanda,
People ask me, why does quantum mechanics matter, given that it's little tiny stuff and who cares? There are three possible answers. From a practical point of view, it doesn't make any difference at all. I mean, you still have to go to work and drive your car and do all day and the rest of it. From a second point of view, it infiltrates everything in the world, especially the world of electronics. When you go to the supermarket and you do the scanning at the checkout, that's a quantum mechanical effect. But I think the important part is the third one, which is essentially a philosophical issue. Why are philosophers so passionate about deconstruction the assumptions of the world? I finally got it. I got it as a result of looking at quantum mechanics and comparing it to classical mechanics. They present two very different ways of thinking about the way that the world works and about what we are. So from a classical perspective, we are machines. And in machines, there's no room for a conscious experience. It doesn't matter if a machine dies, you can kill a machine, you can throw it in a dump, it doesn't matter. If that is the way that the world is, then people will behave in that way. But there's another way of thinking about the world, which is suggested, it's pointed to by quantum mechanics, which suggested that the world is not this clockwork thing, but it's more like an organism. It's a highly interconnected organismic thing of some type, which extends through space and time. In that kind of environment, what I think and the way that I behave has a much greater impact, not only on myself, but on the rest of the world.
I think I saw what the fuck this guy was talking about on mushrooms one time.
So from a very
I ate a
basic
lot of
point
them that
view,
night.
having to do with morals and ethics, what I think affects the world. That's, I mean, in a sense, that's really the key for why a worldview change is important.
Let's talk about the subatomic world, and then we'll talk about what it's telling us about reality. The first thing I want to tell you about the subatomic world is it's totally a fantasy created by mad physicists trying to figure out what the heck is going on when they do these little experiments. By little experiments, I mean big energy in little spaces and little pieces of time. It gets pretty nutty at that realm of things. And so subatomic physics was invented to try to figure that all out. We need a new science down there. It's called quantum physics, and it is subject to a whole range of debatable hypotheses, thoughts, feelings, intuitions as to what the heck is really going on.
So on the one hand, you had a theory which from the conceptual standpoint was profoundly puzzling, and on the other hand, from the practical standpoint, was vastly more successful than anything we had ever seen before. This is the kind of situation that produces the tension that all of the investigations of foundations of quantum mechanics are feeding off of since then. Because on the one hand, this is an acutely paradoxical, puzzling, conceptually confusing theory. On the other hand, we have no option along the lines of throwing it out or neglecting it, because it is the most powerful, proven tool for predicting the behaviors of physical systems that we have ever had in our hands.
The universe is very strange. There seem to be two sets of laws that govern the universe. In our everyday classical world, meaning at roughly our size and time scales, things are described by Newton's laws of motion, set down hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And they work very well for billiard balls and cannonballs and gravity. However, when we get down to a small scale, when we get down to, say, the level of atoms, a different set of laws take over. These are the quantum laws, quantum theory, quantum mechanics. And at that level, particles may be in multiple places at the same time. They may behave as waves, mirrored out spatially and temporally. They may be interconnected over great distances. They may be unified into one quantum state, into one state, governed by one wave function. And the borderline, the threshold, this curtain between the quantum world and the classical world is really mysterious. It's called sometimes the collapse of the wave function, because In the quantum world, everything is in superposition of multiple possibilities. And in the classical world, these multiple possibilities seem to collapse to particular definite choices. So everything is in one particular place.
Quantum mechanics is really the play and display of information, the play and display of potentiality, waves of information, waves of potential electron. And it's important, the word potential. This isn't the world of electrons, it's the world of potential electrons. But when you have to ask the question, waves of what, really? What is the field that is waving? Is it the ocean? No, it's a universal ocean, an ocean of pure potentiality, an ocean of abstract potential existence. We call it the unified field or superstring field. And that's what we're made of.
Wow.
Connectivity among all things is a basic constituent of the fabric of reality. It's very difficult to wrap your mind around that. But Erwin Schrödinger said, he's one of the founders of quantum mechanics, that entanglement, which is this idea of this connectivity, is not just a property of quantum mechanics, it's the property. It's the property of quantum mechanics that makes it very, very strange. And it doesn't seem to fit in with our ordinary world, our ordinary experience, but in fact, it actually does.
Yeah, I think the first time, or no, the second time I watched this, I was actually on shrooms.
You don't have to be like that.
This is a really interesting analogy that they dramatize here. This is very, very cool.
How long has it been since you played? Come on, got the ball. Take a shot. No, my lady, not from there. It's out of bounds. Gotta be on the court to be in play. Welcome to Duke Reginald's court of unending possibilities. Court rules. Gotta sink the last one. Never touched you.
Right.
And it's not solid. This ball is mostly empty.
We were all taught in school that the world is made of stuff, of matter, of mass, of atoms. Atoms make up molecules, molecules make up materials, and everything is made of that. But atoms actually are mostly empty. For example, if this ball were the nucleus of an atom, a proton in a hydrogen atom, for example, then the electron circling this, which would describe the outer limits of that atom, would be out by that mountain over there, roughly 20 miles away. And everything in between is empty. In fact, the universe is mostly empty. However, when we go down in scale in the emptiness, we eventually come to a level, the fundamental level of space-time geometry, the fine basement level of the universe, where there's information, there's a pattern. It's called the Planck scale, and it's the fabric of the universe. And at that level, there's information that's been there since the Big Bang.
Yes, Plumy,
The
Plumy.
universe, even of matter, is actually empty.
Most people think that the vacuum is empty. But for internal consistency of quantum mechanics and relativity theory, there is required to be the equivalent of 10 to the 94 grams of mass energy, each gram being E equals mc squared kind of energy. Now that's a huge number, but what does it mean practically? Practically, if I can assume that the universe is flat, and more astronomical data is showing it's pretty darn flat. If I can assume that, then if I take the volume or take the vacuum within a single hydrogen
All right, this
atom,
guy's a flat earther.
that's
Don't hold
about
that
10
against
to the
him.
minus 23 cubic centimeters. If I take that amount of vacuum and I take the latent energy in that, there is 1 trillion times more energy there than in all of the mass of all of the stars and all of the planets out to 20 billion light years. That's big. That's big. And if consciousness allows you to control even a small fraction of that, creating a Big Bang is no problem.
Huh.
Organizations like NASA, British Aerospace, are all trying to tap into this incredible, unimaginably large energy sea. And they feel if they can tap this, we can travel to different galaxies. So they understand that in empty space, there is this unbelievable energy.
The major basic idea that quantum physics implies, which makes us understand this or even think about this new paradigm, the thing which is that there's this underground, there's got to be a realm of existence which cannot be ever touched on or seen, which bubbles into the existence, giving rise to our understanding of the world.
The tighter physics have tried to grasp onto physical reality, to understand what it's really made of. What are the core building blocks of life? At the basis of it all, life, the universe, slips through your fingers. And you come up with something that's increasingly abstract to come to the realm of pure abstraction. And that's what the unified field is. It's pure abstract potential, pure abstract being, pure abstract self-aware consciousness, which rises in waves of vibration to give rise to the particles, the people, everything we see in the vast universe.
What makes up things are not more things, but what makes up things are ideas, concepts, information.
And like I said, it never touches.
Another strange fact is that objects never really touch each other. When I dribble this ball, the atoms of the ball and the atoms of the ground never actually meet.
What?
Nobody touches nothing. Come on, put your stuff down. Nobody's gonna take it. Like I said, this is my court. It's no problem.
So nothing actually ever touches anything scientifically, according to this guy.
How long has it been? I agree.
The first inkling in physics that we got that time ain't what it seemed to be came with relativity. That was the first inkling. That time was not absolute. It was not the absolute ruler of the universe. That God Almighty did not say 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter. You're in a gravitational field. Your head is actually moving at a slightly faster rate than your feet.
The second law of thermodynamics says that things unwind and move forward. So that gives an arrow of time. But at the quantum world, in the micro world, the second law of thermodynamics doesn't seem to hold, and things can go backwards or be timeless.
The fundamental equations of physics have a property which is referred to as time reversal symmetry. And what time reversal symmetry means is that a set of laws, which are time reversal, are laws that have the following feature. For any process that's in accord with those laws, the same process going backwards is exactly as much in accord with those laws. Okay, that ought to mean that milk jumps out of coffee as often as it dissolves into it, that people get younger looking as often as they get older looking, that we have the same kind of access vis-a-vis knowledge to the future as we do to the past, that by acting now we ought to be able to influence the past just as much as we can influence the future. All of that is wrong. All of that comes into violent conflict with the way we psychologically experience the world.
One of the most unpalatable ideas.
Yeah, so everything you just said was bullshit? Like, what are you saying?
Is the possibility or the notion that the future can have a causative effect on the present. We believe that the past can have a causative effect on the present. I hold the ball, I drop it, it falls. Cause, effect when it hits the ground. But Could the ground be the cause of my dropping the ball in the first place?
It's only in conscious experience that it seems that we move forward in time. In quantum theory, you can also go backwards in time, and there's some suggestion that processes in the brain related to consciousness project backwards in time. For example, in the late 1970s, a neurophysiologist at University of California, San Francisco, named Ben Libet did some very famous experiments. What Libet did was study patients who were having neurosurgery on their brains, with their brain exposed, while they were awake. They were given a local anesthetic to numb the area of the skull and scalp to access their brains. And they were awake, and Ben would talk to these people. So, for example, what he did was he would stimulate their little finger and look at the part of the sensory cortex on the opposite side that was related to that, record from it electrically, and ask the patient when he or she felt the stimulus on the little finger. And he would also stimulate at that particular area of cortex. Now, what you would think would be that if you stimulate the little finger, it takes a finite period of time to get to the opposite side of the cortex. So the patient would report it a fraction of a second later after the stimulus. And when you stimulate it directly, the patient would report it immediately. He found just the opposite. When you stimulated the little finger, the patient felt it immediately. And when he stimulated directly in the cortex, there was a delay. After sorting through all the data and repeating this over and over, Libet came to the conclusion that somehow the brain was projecting information backwards in time, so that it did take a finite amount of time to get to the sensory cortex, but the brain projected it backwards in time so that the conscious perception was that the stimulus was felt when the pinch actually occurred.
There have been some studies which have shown that when people are beginning to move a hand or beginning to say something, that there's actually activity in the brain in certain nerve cells of the brain, even before they become consciously aware of what they're trying to do.
I know it seems to me that I often do things and then decide a fraction of a second later what to do, but I've already done them.
I agree. What's the matter?
I wonder if that's an explanation for deja vu.
How do you know this shit? I read Dr. Quantum comics. Everybody thinks it's just kid stuff, but I know it's real. That's how I do my magic on the court.
Like, I wonder if that's the explanation for deja vu. When you do something, and this guy was saying that according to the laws of quantum physics and the laws of relativity, that you, in theory, when you do something, you've already done them. And I wonder if that's the scientific explanation for deja vu. Put it simply, I don't know. People, I dropped out of school in the 9th grade, so I'm just as lost as anybody here. I just find this shit absolutely fascinating and interesting.
So, what they taught us in school isn't really the way it is. And our senses are playing tricks on us. You just gotta wonder, what is this reality that we find ourselves in? Quantum physics says it's all just waves of information. Do I believe that? I hope so. Yikes!
That's how I do my magic on the court.
Yeah, I always choose the one boy first.
Well, Dr. Quantum says everybody's got it. Everybody's doing it. Doing it constantly. Each and every time you look.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, the waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So when we throw things, that is matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands.
Huh.
Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern. We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter
Robbie.
create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits and it goes through neither. And it goes just one and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this.
I'm fucking
So
baffled by
they
it, bro.
decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange never-world of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
Wow.
We are always the observer. But sometimes we identify with the event so much so that we even lose the aspect of the observer. That's why the materialist gets totally lost and thinks that we could do without the observer.
The physics data tells us that that an object itself is really a simplification for what we call out there. One is particularly when we're looking at atomic and subatomic particles or atomic and subatomic matter in any form. What we find is how we go to look at it, what we choose to examine it with, actually changes the properties of what we observe to be out there.
Is this the observer, and which is so intricate to understanding the wacky, weird world of quantum particles
This lady's awesome.
and how they react? Is this then the observer? And even though we cannot have a quantum field without the observation of scientists who have gone there, who have uncovered it layer after layer after layer. They're all observers. But not one of them agree conclusively on all points in the field, because they are perceiving the field mathematically from different angles of perception.
We don't know in quantum mechanics how to hook ourselves as observers up with the world. We don't know how to treat ourselves as observers as just another part of the physical system that we're describing. The only way we know how to do quantum mechanics as it's traditionally formulated is to keep the observer outside of the system you're describing. The minute you put him in, you get all these paradoxes. And we're forced to say things in quantum mechanics like, look, the book is doing what it's doing because of quantum mechanics, and I see that because I'm there and I see it. And you better not try to analyze that second part of the sentence in terms of applying quantum mechanics to it, because it's going to break down. That's why there are these two separate laws of the evolutions of physical systems. One that applies when you're not looking at them, the other that applies when you are. But that's crazy.
There's no way that we're ever going to mathematize or put into mathematical formula this very act in which a conscious observer comes up with the answer. People say, oh, the measuring instruments, the recorder records it, and there it is. It's on the tape. It's recorded. You forgot one part of the equation. Somebody has to look at the tape. And until somebody looks at the tape, it ain't recorded at all.
When you are not looking, there are waves of possibility. When you are looking, then there are particles of experience.
A particle, which we think of as a solid thing, really exists in a so-called superposition, a spread out wave of possible locations. And it's in all of those at once. The instant you check on it, it snaps into just one of those possible positions.
It's easy
So
to generate.
has anybody experienced that? Like, that's what they're saying pretty much. Like, has anybody experienced that where in a dream, as a matter of fact, a dream is a perfect example of it, where you know something is happening. Say you're in a dream, right? And you know something is happening. You're perfectly aware that something is happening, and the second that you look at it, and it's something that you want to see, but the second that you look at it, it's no longer there. It's not there. It and it plays a trick on you, and it's like, well, fuck you. You don't get it. You don't get to see that. It's kind of what they seem to be talking about here. They seem to be talking about how there is a million, that's an understatement, but there are infinite things going on all in front of your face, all around you. But the second that you choose to observe it and put eyes on it, it's no longer it's no longer there. You as the observer all of a sudden put a limit on it, so it doesn't exist unless you see it. We tell ourselves that these things don't exist unless we see them, but we're constantly relying on our senses to limit what we distinguish to be real. So that's extremely interesting. Right. That's Robbie. That's exactly what the case is. We we convince ourselves that we're insane. We have to function in society. We have to the last thing that we want to do is come off crazy to anybody. So we do exactly what we've been talking about. A lot of people do this. The same things that I was criticizing people for doing, which is, when I made the analogy of someone believing their own lies to the point to where it's a blatant lie, and you believe that lie to a point to where if you put that person on a lie detector test, they would fucking pass, right? I made that analogy. But according to this, we are all absolutely guilty of this. We all do it. We do it in order to fit in. We do it in order to on two levels. We do it to a not seem crazy to other people, but we take that so far that we convince ourselves that what we see is very, very real, or what we have in front of our face, and what everyone else sees, that's the norm. So we convince ourselves to only see these things so that we don't seem different, and we maintain in that safe place of being in the herd. And stepping out of the herd, well, we're afraid of that. We're absolutely afraid of that. We're scared of not being a part of the herd. So we limit ourselves in order to stay part of the herd because it's safe. It's what we know, and it's what we stick to. So that's, to me, overwhelmingly fascinating.
Where the equations of motion will predict that, say, the wave function, the psi of a certain basketball, is uniformly distributed all over the basketball court. We don't have any idea what a state like that would look like. According to the law of quantum mechanics, that's supposed to be a state in which it fails to make any sense even to ask the question, where is the basketball? That is, according to the law of quantum mechanics, asking the question, where is a basketball whose psi is uniformly distributed over a whole basketball court, is the logical equivalent of asking about, say, the marital status of the number 5. Okay? It's not that you don't know the answer. You don't happen to know whether the number 5 is married or a bachelor. It's that the question somehow is radically inappropriate in the first place. The number 5 doesn't have a marital status. There's nothing there to ask about. And similarly, a basketball whose wave function was uniformly distributed over the entire basketball court would not have a position that could even coherently be asked about. Now, the crux of the measurement problem is precisely that. Although the Schrodinger equation predicts under certain circumstances which we basically know how to reproduce in the laboratory, that basketballs should go into states like that, states where there fails to be any intelligible fact, any sensible question even about where they are. And yet, when we go look at the basketball court in situations like that, we invariably see either a basketball over here or a basketball over there or a basketball over there. The fact that we see the basketball in some specific location, as opposed to seeing it in some science fiction state that we can't even imagine what it looks like, where there fails to be a question about what its location is, the fact that we always see it in some definite location is an explicit violation of these equations of motion. And it's exactly there that the measurement problem comes up.
You observe, things happen. When you don't, they don't.
Superheroes use superposition. But the world
That's
we
why
live
this
in shifts
documentary,
reality
Robbie, is called What the
until we
Bleep Do
choose.
We Know?
Heroes choose what they want. Being in many places at once, experiencing many possibilities all at once, and then collapsing on the one. The question is, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Your own mind is creating multiple possibilities in your subconscious. The superpositions of possibilities are in your subconscious. I mean, you may be consciously aware of them, but they exist, I think, in superposition of multiple possibilities, which after a while will collapse to one or the other.
Project or plan into the future or cast thought ahead of itself.
Nice shot.
But the great-great-granddaddy of wacky quantum weirdness is entanglement. If time reversal symmetry destroys the notion of time, then entanglement crushes our experience of space. Two objects, two electrons created together, are entangled. Send one to the other side of the universe. Now, do something to one, and the other responds instantly. Instantly. So, either information is traveling infinitely fast, or in reality, they are still connected. They are entangled. And since everything was entangled at the moment of the Big Bang, that means everything is still touching. Space is just the construct that gives the illusion that there are separate objects. Are we far enough down the rabbit hole
That's
yet?
fucking mind-blowing, dude.
You now can see in numerous labs around the United States objects that are large enough to be seen by the naked eye, and they are in two places simultaneously. And you can actually take a photograph of that. Now, I suppose if you showed a photograph, they'd say, "Oh, great! Here's this nice blob of colored light, and I see there's a, bit of it over here, another bit of it. So you got a picture of two dots. What's the big deal?"
Superposition is pre-detection. What I was speaking about in the film is post-detection. Now, under normal circumstances, a single object, once it has been detected, is in just one position. However, there are states of matter that have been created now in which objects can be in multiple positions simultaneously, not just two, but actually as many as 3,000 positions. The first of these.
All right. I don't know what just happened. Can you all still see this? Can you hear me right now? Press a 1 if you can hear me. Okay, you guys can't hear me right now, can you?